This video is brought to you by MUBI, a curating streaming service showing exceptional films from all around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/princessweeks. Oh, hello. I guess you can say I've chosen a side. Messy dragon female monarchs all day. Hello everyone. I first of all want to apologize for taking so long to actually put up anything about House of the Dragon on the main channel. I was feeling a little conflicted about making content about the show because I initially did get screeners for the first 6 episodes, and it felt very weird trying to have like an in-depth discussion about all the weird minutia and characteristics of the show without spoiling at least the first 5 episodes. But now that the first 5 episodes are over, I am looking forward to actually discussing some of my thoughts and feelings about the show. There will not be spoilers for episode 6. However, I feel it's important that if we're going to have a discussion about this series, we are very clear about, I guess, the not spoiler of the whole thing. That Rhaenyra will not end up being the first undisputed queen of Westeros, and that sucks. And we're going to watch that journey unfold in all of its messy, murderous, dragony glory. In this video, I didn't want to do like an episode by episode breakdown of the series because, quite frankly, I don't think that's very useful at this point. Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, the A Song of Ice and Fire world is very much a sum of its parts kind of series. You really need to take the whole thing in its totality to really get all the minutia and, care that Martin has put into crafting this very elaborate fake historical world. So I'm going to touch on a few topics that I think have actually been interesting, discuss kind of how I feel about the book versus television comparisons of these topics. I haven't seen episodes 7 to 10, so I'm actually excited to see like how they end up adapting certain things. But I feel like there's this elephant in the room for those of us who were really, really unhappy with the ending of Game of Thrones and coming back to watching House of the Dragon.
You know what they say, fool me once, strike one, but fool me twice, strike 3.
Now, speaking from my perspective, I mean, the record is up there. I have always kind of had adaptational issues and issues with the way Game of Thrones had been presenting its story. So the ending of the series being terrible was not a huge shock nor revelation for me. I felt like, again, some of its parts, things, they were making all these very small changes that sort of implied they didn't really understand the overall gravity of what Martin was trying to present in the show. Now, that being said, I still really did enjoy the world that Martin created. I thought it was very interesting. And so when I went back and I listened to Fire and Blood on audiobook, and as I was just revisiting the world, I realized that like I really do enjoy this part of world building. I love seeing how the history informs the choices that characters make. I love being able to have a discussion about characters and get to pull from their fictional history about why they make the decisions that they make. So something like Fire and Blood was actually really interesting to me, and seeing House of the Dragon is equally interesting. If I had any note, I think they should have just started with the conquest. I think doing Dance of Dragons was a very intentional choice because it's very female driven. At the same time, having now been like halfway through Fire and Blood, I wanted to actually stop where I was at with the series so that I could kind of do them side by side, even though I know how the whole thing turns out because I've read this. This is my favorite section of like any World of Ice and Fire stuff, so I literally like, I know this fake history terribly well. Like I can't spell regular words, but I can spell Targaryen. Don't ask me to do it though. To truly understand how Rhaenyra, Viserys, Alicent all find themselves in this situation, you kind of need to know the entire backstory. But we'll do some drunk Targ history another day. So if you're interested in unpacking some certain elements of House of the Dragon, finding out my thoughts on it, and just telling me your own thoughts, let's stick around and do this thing. But first, time to talk about content I really enjoy with our ad from MUBI. This video is sponsored by MUBI. I love MUBI. It has been such a balm to my cinematic soul, getting to check out so many films from all across the world. With MUBI, each and every film is hand selected. Just because I was missing TIFF in real life didn't mean I couldn't have my own film festival at home. If you're in the US, I'd recommend checking out A Girl is Missing, Secretary, and The Cathedral. Secretary is an erotic black comedy that might accidentally awaken something in you when you watch Maggie Gyllenhaal being a submissive to James Spader. I don't speak from experience.
And I've found someone to love.
You can try MUBI free for 30 days at mubi.com/princessweeks. That's MUBI.com/princessweeks for a whole month of great cinema from all around the world so that no one can ever tweet at you, watch more movies. I think in the first 5 episodes, we've gotten a really compelling but straightforward exposition of things that are leading up to the events that will be the Dance of the Dragons, which is the Targaryen Civil War, the first of them. Shout out to the Blackfyre rebellions. See you in the future. And through these episodes, we've seen these small hints, these small cracks developing within the Targaryen family and this ruling dynasty under Viserys I. I have not necessarily enjoyed the time jumps. Between episode and episode, we get time jumps ranging from 6 months to about almost 2 years. And I think in some ways that's a real mistake, because by doing the time jumps, you're kind of just starting the characters off one place and ending them where they need to be for future things and not letting it have a natural build. I know a lot of people weren't fans of The Witcher season 1, how it bounced back and forth through time, but I actually felt that that might be a more informative and more interesting way of filming this season. Not only would we be able to keep actors like Millie and Emily longer in the series, but you would necessarily not get this very straightforward linear thing, because I felt like when I was watching the first 6 episodes that I was watching, you know, a period drama with dragons. And I like period drama, so that's not an insult. But I definitely felt like it was so politically leaning in, like the little bit of fantasy elements were there, but not as intense, because there isn't a White Walkers. There isn't really a lot of suspense if you know, again, the undisputed spoiler of the series and just any little details. You know this is a doomed thing. And so on a certain level, there's something enjoyable about that prequel, but so many changes are being slowly tweaked in order to make it fit into the world that this TV show was, rather than following the book stuff, especially with Viserys. Like, Viserys the First in the books is like this very jovial, happy king, fat, you know, like he loves to throw feasts and jousts, and they aged him up because they wanted, you know, Patty to play the character throughout his lifetime. But I think it's just interesting because Viserys comes to the throne, I believe, when he is 23 or 26. And Aemma Targaryen is very, very young when she gives birth to their first child, because she got married to him when she was 12 or 13 years old. I think maybe as young as 11. And so part of her fertility issues that she has is because she, much like Margaret Beaufort, who was the mother of Henry VII, you know, had a child very young, and it did very lifelong damages to her reproductive system. And it would have been interesting to really get an indicator of what Viserys was like as a ruler before this, because I think you don't really see the height of his reign in this series because there's really no context for it. We've only really seen Westeros under Robert and then the War of the Five Kings. We've never seen a prosperous Westeros. And even now, Westeros kind of looks like shit. Like every time we're in King's Landing, I'm like, wow, the small folk are ratchet.
Yeah, just a few words.
They're always terrible. They're always misogynistic. Honestly, Dany was right to burn this stuff down because this place it's the ghetto. I think that by making Viserys have these prophecies is also interesting because in that sense, they are pulling from the Dunk and Egg novellas, where the character of Egg, who is, I believe, Aegon IV, he is the one who was, you know, a dragon dreamer and was so obsessed with the idea of you know, bringing a dragon back to life, and they believe that he is the reason for the great tragedy at Summerhall that was where Rhaegar was born, who is Daenerys and Viserys' brother. But again, this is what happens when I do these history videos, because like I just get so deep into the lore that I'm like, I want to just talk about all of it. So we really don't get a lot of context for like where Viserys come from and like how far this is and how tumultuous this entire reign is, because a lot of this storyline is taken from the British historical period called the Anarchy, which was the English Civil War that happened after the king named his daughter Matilda to be heir and had all of his knights swear fealty to her because his son and a lot of other nobles and heirs died in this great accident of the White Ship tragedy, and they all drowned. And so he had Matilda be named as his heir. And when he died, they took his nephew Stephen and tried to usurp him into the throne, and it kind of goes back and forth between the two. This series is very much pulling from that. And I think because we get told, you know, the Targaryen dynasty was gone for like this many years, that Viserys is only the 4th or 5th king. That's Aegon, Aerys, Maegor, Jaehaerys, and then him. So he's only the 5th Targaryen king. This is a very new dynasty. And from the very beginning of the dynasty, you see the root of this conflict of whether or not female Targaryens should inherit, you know. And the concept of the show, they kind of make it seem like it was just when Jaehaerys was ruling that it was between Rhaenys and Viserys, but it actually went beyond that. You know, Jaehaerys had an older sister named Queen Rhaena who is amazing. She'll come up later in this video. When Maegor died, she was another person that people are like, well, maybe she's in the succession. And this topic has been growing for a very long time. It kind of reaches its pinnacle with Rhaenyra. And so I do wish that we had the larger context of that and we weren't sort of rushing towards it, because ultimately my biggest concern with the show is that it's gonna drag out the war, and the war is really only 2 years long. I would like for this to be a good self-contained series that takes its natural ending as something that's good to reach, not something to either rush or drag out. So I guess I'm a little concerned about the pacing, because you could really do a whole season of just the lead up to Viserys dying, because he lives quite a while. Everyone's like, oh, he's gonna die soon. I'm just like, he lives a long time. The first scene I really wanted to talk about is the C-section scene, because I think it's interesting how they chose to portray this scene. And trigger warning, because again, it is a very visually aggressive scene where you see Queen Aemma, who has just told her husband, King Viserys, that she does not want to have any more children.
This is the last time, but I've mourned all the dead children I can.
And you know when a woman is saying that she has bodily autonomy in Westeros, it's over for them. So during childbirth, the child is in breach and they have to perform a C-section that will kill her and to potentially save the son. He does this. Viserys allows this to happen without Aemma's consent, and it is cruel and vicious and horrible. To me, it's one of the most brutal scenes that the show has had. And the creators have said that they did this scene purposely to illustrate to everyone that Westeros is a patriarchy.
With the birthing, it was the same. We really wanted to see the female perspective because it's a realistic portrayal of things that used to happen at the hands of men to women.
The thing the Great Council should tell you is that this is a patriarchy.
Wow, I can't believe it. Westeros, a patriarchy? Wow.
Really makes you think.
And not as to say that I have anything inherently against this scene, but, and again, one of the big downfalls of being someone who likes to read the source material is that as soon as you do that, you have a comparison and you start asking questions about like, why this and not that? And so as I was listening to the audiobook and I got to hear the comparison between how they did it in the book and how they did it in the show, I was like, I think I like the show better. Remember I told you that the timeline of kings is Aegon, Aenys, Maegor, and then Jaehaerys, whatever. These are fictional kings. So Aegon had 2 wives, Rhaenys and Visenya, and he really loved Rhaenys, favorite wife, best wife. Visenya, he's like, well, I'm supposed to marry you because that's tradition. It was a very Rachel and Leah situation. My Abrahamics will know what I'm talking about there. So he had a son with both of his wives. Aenys, when he was born, he was a little fragile. He was a little delicate. So they were all very concerned. And then Maegor, he was like, I'm a strong son. 1-1-1. You know, he was beast mode from jump. So that's how he knew he was going to be trouble. Because they didn't have any daughters, they outsourced. So Aenys married a Valerian girl. They got married and they had a bunch of kids. So they had Rhaena, they had another Aegon, this first Aegon dose, Alicent, and Jaehaerys. Maegor, meanwhile, he gets married to somebody and shooting blanks. Nothing's hitting, nothing's happening. Aenys and his wife, Alyssa, they get married, have a bunch of kids. He dies when he's like 33, 35 years old. And so his wife, Alyssa, is equally as young. So eventually, all this shit happens. Evil king defeated. Yeah, Jaehaerys is king. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So Alyssa gets remarried to a Baratheon. Now, by the time that Alyssa has married this Rhaegar Baratheon, she's had 6 children. Okay? And when she's with Baratheon, she has 2 more pregnancies. So she has one where she has a boy with a ridiculous name, and then she gives birth to a young girl named Jocelyn. Now, it is during the birth of Jocelyn that she suffers a painful pregnancy and has to have a C-section that is dangerous performed on her. Now, I just want you to just, for those of you who've seen the episode, you already know, let's just compare the scene in the book to the scene in the show, and you could tell me what you think.
But it could kill her grace as easily as help her, and would almost certainly kill the child inside her. When Jaehaerys asked what could be done, the Maester said, "For the Queen? Nothing. She is beyond my power to save. There is a chance, a slight chance, that I could save the child. To do so, I would need to cut the mother open and remove the child from her womb. The babe might live or not. The woman will die." His words set Queen Alysanne to weeping. The king said only, "The woman is my mother, and a queen," in a heavy tone. He stepped outside again, pulled Rhaegar Baratheon to his feet and dragged him back into the birthing chamber, where he bade the Maester repeat what he had just said. "She is your wife," King Jaehaerys reminded Lord Rhaegar. "It is for you to say the words." Lord Rhaegar, we are told, could not bear to look upon his wife. Nor could he find the words, until the king took him roughly by the arm and shook him. "Save my son," Rhaegar told the Maester. Then he wrenched free and fled the room again. In many of the accounts that have come down to us, we are told that Queen Alyssa woke from her sleep before the Maester could begin. Though racked by pain and violent convulsions, she cried tears of joy to see her children there. When Alysanne told her what was about to happen, Alyssa gave her assent. "Save my babe," she whispered. "I will go to see my boys again. The crone will light my way." It is pleasant to believe these were the Queen's last words. Sad to say, other accounts tell us that her grace died without waking when Maester Kiri opened her belly. On one point, all agree. Alysanne held her mother's hand in her own from start to finish, until the babe's first squall filled the room. Lord Rhaegar did not get the second son that he had prayed for. The child was a girl. Days later, when he had finally recovered himself enough to consider the matter, Rhaegar Baratheon named his daughter Jocelyn. First, however, his lordship had to contend with a more contentious arrival. Dawn was breaking, and Queen Alyssa's body was not yet cold, when Vermithor raised his head from where he had been coiled sleeping in the yard and gave out with a roar that woke half of Storm's End. He had scented the approach of another dragon. Moments later, Dreamfire descended, silver crests flashing along her back as her pale blue wings beat against the red dawn sky. Rhaena Targaryen had come to make amends to her mother. She came too late. Queen Alyssa was gone. Though the king told her she did not need to look upon her mother's mortal remains, Rhaena insisted, ripping away the bedclothes that covered her to gaze upon the Maester's work. After a long time, she turned away to kiss her brother on the cheek and embrace her younger sister. The two queens held each other for a long while, it is said, but when the midwife offered Rhaena the newborn babe to hold, she refused. "Where is Rhaegar?" she asked. She found him below in his great hall with his young son Boromund in his lap, surrounded by his brothers and his knights. Rhaena Targaryen pushed through all of them to stand over him and began to curse him to his face. "Her blood is on your hands," she raged at him. "Her blood is on your cock. May you die screaming." Rhaegar Baratheon was outraged by her accusations. "What are you saying, woman? This is the will of the gods. The stranger comes for all of us. How could it be my doing? What did I do?" "You put your cock in her. She gave you one son. That should have been enough. Save my wife, you should have said. But what are wives to men like you?" Rhaena reached out and grabbed his beard and pulled his face to hers. "Hear this, my lord. Do not think to wed again. Take care of the whelps my mother gave you, my half-brother and half-sister. See that they want for nothing. Do that, and I will let you be. If I should hear even a whisper of your taking some other poor maid to wife, I will make another Harrenhal of Storm's End, with you and her inside it."
Once I get finished whooping both of y'all's asses, you're gonna wish you never met a hood rat like me.
I'm not saying that one is inherently better than the other, but in my personal taste, I really like the idea of Rhaena coming in and like talking shit to the man, so automatically just saying bullet to the patriarchy. I like the fact that Alyssa is made aware of what's about to happen to her and has some kind of autonomy in that choice. I like that everybody in the room is sort of has this trepidation. And I think it's made more interesting to have this complicated dynamic, that it is done in this way where there is tragedy, there is grief. You call it the patriarchy, but the woman isn't just put on a chopping bladder with no autonomy. Because ultimately, I think what is frustrating about a show that wants to like call out the patriarchy, that it can only do that so much without trying to ascribe to its historical accuracy rules, which just leads to a bunch of bullshit that I think makes shows like this very exhausting to watch. Personally. More importantly, what I think is so frustrating about the C-section sequence is that we don't need to learn about to me, seeing the C-section scene with the joust, I was like, oh, I get it. I know how film works. Got it. Framing. I understood all the intention. And again, I don't think the intention is wrong, but I think that by making Aemma in this place where she is literally put up as a sacrifice and all autonomy is ripped from her, it's like a double brutality, especially because in the books, like, Aemma's death is just kind of like, and she died. It's kind of like the Tamari and Tenten fight in the manga versus the Tamari and Tenten fight in the anime. Like, in the manga, it's brief and it's one page. In the anime, Tenten gets her ass whooped for no reason. We didn't have to see that. She had to be disrespected on the screen like that. Was it entertaining for me? Yes. But did we need to see her get wrecked like that by Tamari? No, that was disrespectful. That's kind of how I feel. You can have the same impact without needing to make her so unable to have autonomy in what her choices were. So the other thing I've been seeing a lot of discourse about is about Alicent Hightower. Now, I did put a little bit of green in my eyes for Alicent, but my makeup is not very good. So Alicent Hightower is a very interesting character, and I honestly really love the actress playing her, Emily Carey, who is a queer young woman, and I think she's done a really great job at capturing all the nuances and layers of Alicent. At the same time, I do sort of dislike that her own ambition has been removed from the series, because in the book, and I'm going to say that a lot, so if you want to do a drinking counter, get it on. In the books, Alicent is in the court during the reign of Jaehaerys. So she's already in the court system. She's supposed to be at least maybe 5 or maybe even 10 years older than Rhaenyra. So the idea of them having a very close-knit relationship is an interesting choice to make because it makes the stakes of their rivalry more intense. But to me, it sort of reminds me of my frustration with the Shae Tyrion dynamic of, okay, so you made them have a legitimate relationship, but the end game is still the same. Like, it doesn't make the choices more satisfactory, it makes them just more depressing, in my opinion. Like, Alicent therefore is going to make the choice to deeply, deeply harm her friend based on her father's paranoia. That doesn't make any sense because there's no organic resentment between the two women. And because we have a time jump between when Alicent is declared to say that she's going to be the intended queen to all of a sudden she's 2 babies deep, we don't really have an ability to see, like, okay, well, what happened between those time periods. And one of the things that's really interesting about Alicent is that in the book, there are rumors about her own virtue, which would make her whole, like, paranoia about Rhaenyra's virtue feel more earned, because right now she just seemed like a hater.
It was foolish of you to place yourself in a position where your virtue could even come into question. The king has strived to find you a good match, and so have I. If that lord were to think that you were being sullied, it would ruin everything.
To be quite honest, it's like, girl, mind your business. She the princess of Dragonstone. If she want to be in these streets where her uncle, she Targaryen, they got the exception clause. Let it rock. If she want to get Sir Criston Cole's, white cloak dusty, that's on her time. I don't have any problems with that. You in court, this is ho town. I don't understand it. But in the book, it's about Rhaenyra wanting to be the number one woman in court. It reminds me a lot of how people fictionalize the conflict between Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Beaufort and trying to make it seem like because they were both, powerful ruling women that they had to be in conflict with each other. And at least in this, there is stakes because Alicent is the mother of the first son, and therefore she should be entitled to all of the things of what it means to be, the queen's mother and all these honors and graces, and she doesn't get them because Rhaenyra is technically above her as Princess of Dragonstone in certain contexts. And so that's where their rivalry comes from. Now it's all about Rhaenyra's virtue and who she fucking and who she's not fucking. And to me, it's just like, mind your business. Anybody asks you to be in her shit anyway. Go pray. You got issues with her, go pray about your husband's everything.
Do you not want your son to be king?
What mother wouldn't?
You mustn't ignore the certain truth that if Rhaenyra were to step over Aegon to ascend the throne, the realm would tear itself apart.
Go look to thy own house. And I think that turning Alicent into a hater instead of just really leaning into the sort of more political prowess of her is frustrating because it makes her feel like more of a puppet of her father than someone working on her own autonomous journey. So, Editor Princess here, I just had to add this line from Miguel, one of the showrunners for House of the Dragon. Here is how he described Alicent and how they depicted her. We said, what if Alicent is like Women for Trump and Rhaenyra is like punk rock? If you really focused in on the patriarchy's perception of women and the fact that they'd rather destroy themselves than see a woman on the throne. That wasn't a perspective I have ever told before. I think it made this show feel more contemporary too. Why do we let these people make media? Women for Trump? Like, this is a show based on a book that is based on medieval fantasy, but your only reference that you can think of for writing a woman with conservative ideology is Women for Trump. I hate it here. And like I said, I do like Alicent, and she's going to make some fucked up choices soon. And that's going to be very exciting for me. I just wish that they had made choices of letting her be more political without it being like her father and without making her like be betrayed. Like, why can't she just be an ambitious woman who's like, I'm the queen, I want to rule, I want my son to rule because I want to be in the best position possible, and that's not my child, so them's the breaks. There have also been people who were discussing the relationship between Sir Criston Cole and Rhaenyra, and if it sort of is dubious consent, and what does it mean, and all these other elements. And I will say, for my part, I think that while Rhaenyra is a princess, Criston Cole is a Kingsguard, and therefore it seems like he's indebted to her. I think what's important to remember is that, like, Rhaenyra's chastity, Rhaenyra's virginity, Rhaenyra's status as a woman will always be a hindrance to her in this world. So, like, her choosing to have sex with Sir Criston Cole technically gives him power over her, not vice versa. Because if he says anything about her virtue, or she's the one who's gonna have the rumors about her. Like, just from being around her uncle and being seen at night, she has rumors about her. So her action of having sex with him is her showing that she not just cares about him, but trusts him to protect her. And so his inability to understand that is frustrating to me. Like, there's nothing I despise more is like watching a period drama with like a patriarchal setting where like a male lover gets in his feelings because his mistress is like, no, you're my man, but you're not my husband. And it's like, that's the wave. Like, you get to be the side piece of the most powerful woman in Westeros. And you mad because you don't want to marry you? Bruh, you don't got nothing to offer her. You know, it's like, it's really just, it was really pick-me behavior. It was very dusty. It was very embarrassing because he is very fine. He does not have to be like this. You know, it's just like you literally unsecured your own bag because of your own insecurity. So, Edit a Princess one last time. I actually wanted to revisit the scene and make sure that I wasn't sort of missing anything because obviously power dynamics are tricky, and I didn't want to be dismissive of people who may have seen it as an abuse of power. And I think, in my opinion, from the way it is shot, the way it's filmed, the playfulness, the context of these are two people who are not allowed to be together is framed as more forbidden romance than power structure. I think also a part of it is just knowing that Criston Cole is much older than Rhaenyra is an element for me. So when I watched this scene and how it was shot and just the way that they're just undressing together and everything, it feels fully consensual. And there was a moment where he's like, stop. He's stopping her from taking off her clothes. And then she moves to the side. And so I feel like when that moment where she moves to the side and she's no longer playfully blocking the door, like that's the moment that if he really didn't want to be there, I feel like he would have left. Obviously, I think there's a lot of room for conversation. And as Jessie Gender, who we spoke about this episode, we both talked about how like there seems to be no sense from the creative team how it could be read as a power dynamic differential in any way, either in the age difference between them or the power dynamics or anything. So it's also just very frustrating that the writers don't seem to be having those same conversations. So that's just where I stand having rewatched the scene. I think that it is filmed and shot and meant to be seen as playful and consensual, and I think the actors portray it as a consensual moment between forbidden lovers. But of course your mileage may vary, and I totally understand how it could be triggering for someone. Because you know what? Breakbacks or Breakbones, whatever his nickname is, the strong boy, the tall strong boy, he would have handled that. Don't need it. Don't need you. The other thing that makes it weird is that I don't think the show has really sat down and fully explained things like the faith, the seven, the full history of like where, because I think one of the things I actually had a discussion with a friend about when we were talking about, it really does inform the actions of people. For example, like Catelyn Stark's anger and frustration and towards Jon Snow just seems like the typical evil stepmother stuff, right? But when you learn about the Blackfyre rebellions, the War of the Nine Penny Kings, all of these issues and battles and scrimmages that happened because of bastards and the claimants of bastards against trueborn sons, then you realize why she has this bias. It's not just because she's haughty, although it is a character flaw which she's allowed to have, and she also just is being a little bit petty. But there is a context for why these things matter. There is a context for which these characters feel the way that they feel. And I feel like because they want to rush through things or skip through things that might not be as interesting, it hinders it. For example, when Alicent says, you Targaryens have queer customs, referring to Rhaenyra and Daemon boning, it would be interesting and important to know that the faith is anti-incest, except the Targaryen exception is something that was settled only like a generation ago, because it was King Jaehaerys who had to undo all of the bad juju that Maegor did, because Maegor, he was extra. He was like the future of Westeros. Okay, he has 6 wives, still no children, so I think he was boop, 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 boop. Which brings us to another topic. Put a pin in that, princess. So like Jaehaerys is the one who had to go out and tell everyone, like, listen, he like hired a bunch of septums and was like, listen, okay, what y'all are gonna do is you're gonna go out and tell people, yes, the faith says that incest is bad. You should not lay with your cousin, mama, sister, none of that, unless you're a dragon, because we are the blood of the dragons and we are above it. We're above it. Like, that's what they did to get away with it. That's why Jaime and Cersei are seen as a scandal. And that's probably why Jon finds it uncomfortable when he's with Daenerys, whereas Daenerys is like, oh, it's fine. Like, auntie, uncle, we've been doing this since jump. And so that explains it. And you don't really understand that until you realize that, like, yeah, this is a series in which people's faith and religion does actually play into their actions and lack thereof. So without that context, you are also missing a part of why Alicent would feel the way that she would, why other people might. And just because they embrace it with the Targaryens and are willing to sort of like marry Rhaenyra to baby Aegon, that's not what everyone else would do, even though they do be doing some cousin shit from time to time. But that's just monarchy. So going back to the whole Maegor shooting blanks thing, the other thing I think is interesting is that one of the things you start realizing as you are going through Game of Thrones and the mythology and the history is that the Targaryens clearly have reproductive issues. And so I think that part of the thing that's interesting is that as much as the show and the mythology around the Targaryens is this exceptionalism of purity and blood of the dragon, the blood of the dragon is clearly curdling, and there's just so much stuff that's interesting about their reign. Like, everything that happened under King Jaehaerys' reign, that should be a show. He got all these daughters who are living their best life out there acting crazy. Listen, Targaryens, we out here. You find out how those dragon eggs, you find out the origin of them, it's fire and blood. The two last things I want to talk about is sort of like the way race is depicted in the show and then the queerness. Because this last episode, and what has kind of been frustrating me about the show is that fandom is gonna fandom. Fandom is racist. This doesn't surprise me at all. And also, I feel like we just need to start being fun about it. They don't want us in their things. They don't want us in their things at all. They don't want us as elves. They don't want us as dragon riders. They don't want us as mermaids. They don't want us in shit. They either want us in what they think is our own stuff, which they will joke about and meme, or they don't want us there at all. And you know what? To that I say, fuck you. Fuck you. Because I'm so glad that that even with these terrible raggedy wigs, we are still here snatching the eyebrows off of Matt Smith still. Okay, if he had any to give, we would have taken them shits anyway. I do find it frustrating that we know that there are brown people and black people in the world of Song of Ice and Fire. And I think my biggest issue with the race bending thus far is that they have done it with no explanation about why there's no black people around anymore. Maybe they'll come up with some explanation about that later. But also, like, we know that there are prejudices and racisms against darker skinned people in Westeros. We know that from the Summer Island people that come. We know that from the Dornish. So it is weird to me that they're going to bring in the Valyrian, talk about how exceptional they are, bring them in, but just pretend that they don't exist racially. And it's like, that's not interesting. I'm not saying that racism has to be the exact same way as it is in our world, but this is a society in which each culture, each nation has stereotypes about them, jokes that people make about them. How are you going to integrate the fact that these characters are visibly different into your world? And why are you having them walk around with these raggedy ass wigs? Truly, I will say, the wig department must be colorblind, because everybody's wig is terrible, except Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra probably has the best wig, although there's a certain point I felt like her foundation was very much peeking through, because Millie's Australian, so she's a little bit tan. But the wigs is redonkulous. When they cut Daemon's wig, it was like, okay, there's the doctor. We can live with this, okay? Put some eyebrows on that boy, but we can live with this because he was blonde on the crown and we made it work. But with the Valerians, they either have locks or they have like these giant curls that have the most impossible textures. And I'm just like, listen, I know that we don't have relaxer in this world, but if half these kids are supposed to be mixed anyway, can we just get some silky smooth and just figure this shit out? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just have, and they're so inconsistent with how they cast these little beautiful brown children. And I'm just sitting here like, man, I really wish that these casting departments would not just use you for clout, but actually think about the way that they style you and design you and think about the long-lasting implications of your characters. Wouldn't it be nice if color and race bending wasn't just used for diversity points, but actually to create a more fuller, interesting world where characters can interact with difference and come up with different scenarios that don't have to necessarily be reflective of us, but still something different? Wouldn't that be nice? But no, it's just sort of like bland, whatever. I mean, I didn't mind it in the Wheel of Time, which everyone has told me is bad and we're not supposed to like it, but I'm different. I really enjoyed it, so whatever. But I just feel like because we've seen the racism in Westeros, it's weird to just be like, oh, it doesn't exist anymore. As for the queerness, I was very agitated at how they chose to kill Joffrey, new Joffrey, not old Joffrey. In the books, take a shot, Joffrey is still dating Lenore, still doing his thing with Lenore, still being best friends. But he's killed in a tourney in combat with Sir Christian Cole. And I just thought to myself, like, rather than have this character who is a gay knight die in glory in a field and, like, you know, in battle and have that nobility. And there's even a really fun sequence where, like, Lenore gives his lover his favor and he and Rhaenyra just laugh about it. And I'm just kind of like, that would have been really cute to see. That would have been fun if we had to see him die right away. And it was just very disappointing that they had this gay couple. And I knew that one of them was going to die. I knew that Joffrey was going to die from the beginning. It's in the wiki. But at least he died with dignity. At least he died in battle. He wasn't just stereotyped. But they did the same thing that they did with Loras, where they just kind of make him the sassy white gay that's there. He literally died by being shady. He was too shady to Sir Criston Cole because Criston Cole has no chill. He's very embarrassing, and that's why he's dead. And somehow Cole's is gonna get away with it. Like, you can't just kill the Queen of Westeros' husband's boyfriend and you're just gonna be living? That don't make no sense. And it's just frustrating because we only have so many queer characters that are confirmed in Game of Thrones, and most of them are dead or are marked to die, or we don't really see, or are just there by implication because of the historical accuracy settings of everything. And we finally get this one bit of open rep, and it's very terrible chemistry, terrible kissing, very, 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 very weak. But we don't even get the dignity of having them exist for more than just one episode. Just one. You couldn't even just introduce that character and that relationship the episode before, and then maybe they can do the tourney and die. It's like they just kind of rush through it. And it's like, in this very heterosexual show, these very heterosexual stakes, we would like the few queer characters that we have to have some swagger, you know? Am I sad Oberyn died? Yes. Did he go out like a badass? Yes, which is why I don't find it to be a bury your gaze moment, because he wasn't killed for right after confirming his sexuality or treated as only a one-note queer character. He was a character that mattered and was mourned, whereas with Joffrey, he literally existed to be gay and then die because he was literally just talking about gay shit to a straight man. Ultimately, I really enjoy so far House of the Dragon, if only because I'm fascinated with the history of the Targaryen dynasty. I'm interested in the world. I'm interested in seeing how it's going to bring together these different timelines and bring it together to match with A Song of Ice and Fire. And I will say, despite all of that, the fact that they keep bringing up the prince who was promised prophecy and, you know, A Song of Ice and Fire, I will not lie, I lolled. When I heard that, I was like...
Aegon called his dream the Song of Ice and Fire.
Somebody give me a chair.
I do love how they're trying to retroactively realize that they did Daenerys exceptionally dirty, and they're trying to fix that, but they can't. As much as they wish it, as much as they wish that they could, they fucked over our girl. And they're just gonna have to live with that. I don't think that the changes that House of the Dragon has made from the book are unilaterally good or bad. They are just changes. I do get concerned about this because I think, despite my ups and downs with Martin's writing and how it can be too long and too extraneous, he is someone who clearly thinks about the motivation of his characters, about how one action leads to another. And so when little things are changed that seem innocuous, they tend to transform the entire character as it goes forward. Like, am I interested more in Alicent's actions because she was friends with Rhaenyra? A little bit, but more so, it makes her more evil. Like, you know, it makes her worse in my mind because she's going to do terrible things to someone whose head used to sit on her lap, you know? And I do love that it's more female focused, that we get these scenes of female pleasure, that Matt Damon is out here just basically doing his best Edmund from King Lear. I mean, truly some great bastard acting right there. And everyone is great in the series. I do just wish that it was taking more time to let us breathe and grow and really love these characters, because even so, like, even just the fact that they're aging them up with new actors is like a big difference. Like, we watched the actress who played Arya grow up in this role. We watched Sophie Turner grow up in this role. That's part of our attachment to these characters. And now they're just kind of like, all right, we're done with this one, putting in a new one. But I think it would have been better to either go back and forth through time and have us experience these characters in these different lenses, or just have it spaced out. Just do a 5-episode, 6-episode season with the younger actors, and then another half with the older ones in the next season. Like, if it's gonna be that it's gonna be these older actors the majority of the case, it feels like a missed opportunity to not be able to really experience these young actors more. That being said, I am happy and excited to see Emma Darcy, because Emma, they are so attractive. and my girl Cook, because we have the same last name, so we might share a common white ancestor somewhere out there in the ether, Olivia Cook and me. So I'm rooting for them. I think House of the Dragon is fine. I haven't watched Lord of the Rings, so I can't compare, but I do know that I came into the show with sort of like expectations, and it has sort of met them where I needed it to be. I think that the show is trying to learn from its mistakes. I don't think it has entirely, but I think it's making more interesting choices. I think it's trying to really reflect on what made the original series work. I think it still has work to do, but I think it's doing the best it can as a prequel series, but also a continuation as one of the most popular fantasy series of all time. Well, since my video has been delayed because I'm waiting for my sponsor ad to get back to me, and the 6th episode has just been released, I decided, F it, let's discuss the 6th episode. I'm gonna say that I think Lenora is probably one of the major victims of this whole time jump shenanigans, because you have this like beautiful young black woman, and it's like she appears to be 12. They age her up again so that she can flirt with Daemon, age her up again so that she can die and after giving birth to Daemon's kids. It's like, no character development, no growth, no interesting interactions. Like, her death scene is very poignant, like, it's very like, but it's like, is this it? Yes, it is it. So it's very distressing that, you know, we have these talented black actors who are coming in here, and, you know, and non-black actors, because you have the Asian actress who is playing Daemon's mistress, and they're here to do what? They get no character development. They're just kind of here. The only long-term character of color that we're going to get is Corlin, and, you know, even Lenore is treated like a goof, and not treated like a respectable character, and he's black and queer, so it's like double erasure would have been better. And to me, it's just like, I don't understand why, like, this is the thing that frustrates me about when people like race bend characters with like no thought. Like, I get it that Lenore is also mixed race, and so like his children can look very white. You know, we see when Meghan Markle and Harry Child look like very Caucasian, right? The issue is that they also cast Lenora and Daemon's children as visibly black twins. So it makes Rhaenyra's trying to show up with her two light-skinned, dark-haired children extra ridiculous. All they had to do to create any kind of... And, like, I know in the books it's supposed to be obvious because they all have silver hair. But if you're adapting it to an audience like us, and you're going to make these characters black, well, the thing that we're going to notice is not that they don't have white hair, it's that these children don't got not a single lick of brown phenotype up in here. You know, especially when you had, you know, Rhaenys is supposed to have dark hair. You made her have white hair for some reason. You could at least have done the Baratheon genes. You don't have nothing. It just feels very clumsy. And, you know, I don't quite care for it. Then we have Alicent going full Eva MAGA mode. I guess they really are leaning into that Trump quote that we discussed earlier. And I think that having the choice of her be the one to decide that they're not going to marry the children together really solidifies Alicent as the person we're supposed to see as the enemy. I would recommend for those who want like a more nuanced version or view of Alicent should check out Hill's Alive videos, because she's very anti-Targaryen, which I understand, even though I don't feel exactly the same way, but her videos are very good and I like them very much. But I do feel like they are kind of making Alicent less of a political player and more of like this scorned woman thing, which makes her very unlikable. Like we talk about like honor and decency. I'm like, girl, it's the Red Keep. This is Westeros. Y'all ain't decent at all. Your man is your best friend's daddy. Former best friend's daddy. It's not, what decency? Kristen Cole, and someone reminded me that like the actor himself is a man of color, is a mixed race man of color, and it's like, so on top of him being Dornish and being played by a brown person, he's also like still salty over this white woman 10 years later that he's gonna harass and harm her own children. It's like pathetic. It's pathetic, and it's just so upsetting to see. I don't understand. Like, Alicent being responsible indirectly for, like, the Strong's death is giving Henry II, like, will no one rid me of this turbulent priest energy? And, like, low-key, here for it. Just don't expect me to cry for her, you know? Like, the thing about you know me, I love a baddie. Like, I sometimes I rewatch Cersei blowing up the Temple of Baelor, or whatever the fuck it's called, and I just think, wow, what chaos. So I hope Alicent gets to lean into that, because otherwise right now she's just coming off very salty and it's not fun to watch. Anyway, I'm gonna stay unbent and I'm broken, y'all. But I do think this episode was fine. I think all these episodes are fine. I made like a whole tweet thread about Alicent and what I feel about her. And I feel like as much as the show is adding sort of like some story interesting layers, because the book Fire and Blood is not a thorough, you know, novel like the other books are, I do feel like they are just kind of making Alicent a cliche of a bitter Trump wife, and that's not who she was. But this is what happens when your only concepts of women in power and women in conflict took place in the modern day. You know, women have been scrapping and being our own worst enemies for a long time. You could do better. And I think at the end of the day, it's hard to root for Alicent at all, because she's just down for the patriarchy. She's just upset that Rhaenyra getting her nothing, and why should I be mad at her for that? What do you guys do with me? Nothing. Zero. Especially since if she was a man, who would care? Nobody. So why should I care? I won't. So, what do you think of House of the Dragon? Let me know in the comments below. This was a more off-the-cuff video because I'm actually just getting very burnt out of having to do long video essays if I want to talk about any one topic, because it just feels extraneous and long for no reason. I do miss doing this. So if you guys like this, I will probably be doing more videos like this in the future. So if you like this video, please like, please comment, please share, please ring whatever the notification bell is. And if you enjoy my work and want to see more of it, you can check me out on Patreon, where I do reactions to movies and pilot episodes. And I just recently recorded me reacting to Wonder Woman 1984, and soon I'll be reacting to all 3 of the Charmed pilots, starting with the unaired one. So we have fun over there, and we also have movie night, and this month we will be watching Fern Gully. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and remember, Targaryens are not fireproof. They're just lightly heat resistant. of the things I actually had a discussion with a friend about when we were talking about my homegirl. What the fuck is her name? Tully. What's Sansa's name again? What is Sansa's mama's name? Let's Catelyn. So the thing about it, why